All right, this is the Big Douglas Show. We are live on a Wednesday. Nate Coleman is back in the co-host chair, and our guest today is Matt Kelly, the Podfather. How are you, Matt?
Hey, bud. I'm feeling great.
Every Wednesday is fantasy football. We try to learn a little bit of something to get us ready for our fantasy football teams. The great thing about fantasy football, I think, is we're all kind of a family. It's supposed to be fun. So, first timers to the show, Matt, we'd love to know a little bit about you, how you got started, and all the stuff you got going on. You got a ton of stuff going on.
I started playerprofiler.com about 8 years ago. We decided to develop a whole bunch of advanced stats and metrics because at the time, football had been really not embracing analytics at all. It's been slow, and it's been happening more and more lately, as I think most people have started to understand with some of the play calling, some of the going forward on fourth down and not kicking field goals. And so it's been a very slow process. But when I got started, they were kicking on 4th and 1 at the goal line every time.
Right. Yeah.
So, we were early in that, and that's been good. And then fantasy footballers have really embraced the site, and the efficiency metrics and the opportunity metrics that we have that no one else does. Plus, we bring in a lot of like athleticism metrics. So NFL draft enthusiasts love the site as well. So it's a great place to understand. Hey, we just drafted this guy, Terry McLaurin. What do I need to know about him? What's interesting? Is there some upside there? And I can tell you that there was no way you could have known. Some people went to the Senior Bowl, I guess, really loved him at the Senior Bowl.
Right.
But even then, people also loved Denzel Mims at the Senior Bowl.
So, I like Denzel Mims at the Senior Bowl.
Exactly. So, it would have been really tough. It would have been really tough. Based on the production metrics at Ohio State, it would have been really tough to pinpoint Terry McLaurin as a big breakout star in the NFL. But we did see the speed, and we did see the level of competition and the competition for targets at Ohio State. So there were some indicators that it was a nice upside play for the Washington when they drafted him. And so that's what our tool is all about, is try to figure out, okay, was this a good move for my team drafting this guy? Like, so for example, this year in the 3rd round, if you looked up Jalen Tolbert and you see he has like an incredible dominator rating and a nice athletic profile, you're like, oh, wow, it looks like Dallas might have got a steal there in the 3rd round. Turns out that's exactly what happened.
What were you doing before fantasy football?
Well, I was in software development and design, and I was in sales and product management. And then I went to a design firm just doing web design. And so ended up using a lot of that, skill, attention to detail, whatever you want to say. That ended up being a big part of the ultimate web development projects that we started at Player Profiler to create a user experience that is immersive, that is, sort of a modern look and feel that most people can appreciate, and they feel like they're not being inundated. To be able to present the number of stats and metrics we do without people feeling overwhelmed is hard. But I think we did it, and part of the reason why was my background, and some of the software we developed when I was younger was for colleges and universities, was for old ladies working in, college admissions offices and stuff. And so it's been all about making it easy, making it digestible. And so making advanced stats and metrics for football digestible, I think is an important mission, because it is underappreciated.
Well, being free, he might add. A lot of their products, you can just go on Player Profile or type in a player's name, and it is free. The products they do have that you have to pay for are a great price. I mean, to be honest, like I have the Dynasty Dominator app, and on that app, you can just plug in a trade. You can plug in a stock value of any player you want. Really cheap to update.
$5. $5 a year.
$5. And
$5 a year.
Yeah, and how many trades offers do you send out like every single day? Hopefully, so
I mean that's a great. Hopefully, then you're enticed to get the Dynasty Deluxe package, which is our full Dynasty rankings, projections, a draft board. You can see trades that are happening, across other leagues. You can then analyze the trades. And so you see an ADP tool, mock drafts, even during the fall. It's important to see the mock drafts to get an idea of these guys' valuations during the year when you're in trades, because the ADP data kind of falls off when the season starts. So we have tons of tools in the Dynasty Deluxe to help people, but the majority of the actual data, the stats, the metrics are free. And when I got started, a lot of people that thought they knew what they were doing, they told me, "Oh, you got to lock those down. You got to put locks on those. You got to make people pay if they want to get your proprietary efficiency stats." And I said, I just think I want people to use the site and enjoy it, and we'll figure out a way to monetize it later. And a lot of successful companies, that's their attitude, and it's worked out.
It's worked out. I mean, I have a PFF subscription. No offense to Player Profiler. I use my military discount to pay for 50% of it. It's still like over $100. So for, the casual fan to be able to just log online, go onto Player Profiler and type their like favorite player in and see all this stats and information. It's awesome. I mean, I know even like going to the games and on Twitter, the most casual of fan can have some sort of like advanced metric now. And it's cool to see them actually use it, actually embrace it, and use it in like their everyday fandom, which is great for me.
Sorry to PFF. Sorry to anyone else that's selling metrics at a high price. I apologize if we've disrupted things. I don't know.
I went over to the podcast too. Correct me if I'm wrong. 600 episodes is incredible.
We just did our 600th episode of just the Mind of Mansion show.
Right.
So on our podcast feed, we've got a dynasty show, a high stakes fantasy show, sort of a prospect show, for a college show, a whole bunch of shows. The show where I interview people, going all the way back to Evan Silva many, many years ago, my first guest in like whatever it was, 2015. Since then, we've done 600 episodes of that show.
Now, speaking of Evan Silva, here's a good segue. You guys haven't done your team takedown episode yet, right? Because every year I patiently wait into summer for this episode to come out where they just dismantle some poor NFL organization. I mean, I'm always terrified it's going to be the Commanders. Every year I'm like, oh God, not this year. And every year we're close. But how close have the Commanders come to being chosen to draw your ire, draw your anger? And who's next this year? Who's your target for 2022?
I think the Commanders have been in the top 3 candidates the last 3 years. Just because, Dan Snyder is such a loathsome character, right? And
loathsome is perfect.
It's just, and then to see like them getting awards like from the American Cancer, Society, his wife was Woman of the Year, and it's just like, what are we doing? What, like, the things you can buy with money, the reputational sort of rehabilitation that you can do with money is just gross. And Dan Snyder is like the grossest of the gross. So, in terms, just, we don't have to get into all the shit that he's done over the years. It's just crazy that this guy is still at it. And he's one of the best in the game in terms of like using your power, influence, and money to, sort of buoy your reputation. He's right there. He's right near the top. And the rest of us that are like hardcore football fans have been following the franchise for many years, remembering it all the way back to, Joe Gibbs and even before that. This is a storied franchise, and it deserves better than who they have as the main administrator. I also don't want the team getting ripped away from Dan Snyder like they did with Jerry Richardson either. I don't want it to go down that way. I don't want it to be Roger Goodell. I don't want Roger Goodell having more power, right? Like, that's the problem, right? It's like, well, the expedient thing would be for Goodell to take the team. Well, I don't want Goodell having more power. Fuck Goodell. Are you kidding me? There's another guy that's been, rehabilitating his image. What are we talking about? Roger Goodell sucks. I don't want him having more power. I would love for there to be a way that sort of a grassroots effort where he just eventually decides, you know what, I'm giving up. I'm giving up. I'm gonna put this thing on the block. I'm getting out of here.
And we say that all the time. Like, it can't even be fun to own. Like, I would think owning an NFL team should be a lot of fun. And I can't imagine that he's having a lot of fun as the owner of the Commanders. Now, you said Bowie, which is great because he's
he's just a miserable person. That guy.
Gotta be.
No, Matt, you're the king of coming up with great titles for your podcast. I think this could be Dan Snyder cockroach effect, because he just survives the nuclear holocaust. He's always around.
Yeah, it's still fun for him. It can't be. Can't be. I feel like he sucked all the fun out of this. It was his childhood team. I get it. But at this point, Dan, I think you sucked all the fun out of it. This year, however, we have a better candidate, which is Seattle. Okay. Seattle is, especially now that we have this Baker Mayfield news. I talked to Evan last night. So we started planning it last night. We talked about it. And I said, please, God, before we record, I think it's going to be early next week, let them sign Baker Mayfield. Because it's just so indicative of exactly what's wrong with the direction of that franchise. Either you're rebuilding or you're not. That's what we say to Atlanta. That's what we say to Washington. That's what we say to Seattle. Either you're rebuilding or you're not, right? This is why Detroit's doing such a great job, because they raised their hand and said, hey, we're rebuilding. We're going to stink. And we're going to bring in the knuckle dragger coach, and we're going to work hard. And we're just going to go ahead and focus on the draft and maximizing our picks and making smart decisions in free agency and thinking about the long run, building the offensive line, building the defensive line. That's going to be our priority. It's not hard. Like, it's not even, it's not even like about metrics. It's just common sense of how you know how to build a franchise. You know that you don't build a franchise by wallpapering Baker Mayfield onto the quarterback position. That's not it. What is your goal? Is your goal to win a championship, or is your goal to go 7-10?
They're taking the Carolina blueprint with Sam Darnold from last year.
Exactly. Carolina, another one where it's like Washington, Carolina, Seattle, they're all gunning for 7-10. I mean, you can say what you want about Houston, but they at least have waved the white flag and said, hey, we're rebuilding. They stink at rebuilding. But at least, how are there so few teams in all other leagues? There's a lot of teams, like in baseball, that are in rebuild mode. Like, you can go to every division. There's one or two teams that are, they're volunteering and happily, with eyes wide open, rebuilding, because they know that's the way to be the next Astros. That's the way. Whereas in the NFL, there's like one or two teams that are like out in the open rebuilding. The rest of them are in some form of delusion that, oh, they're going to draft Kenny Pickett and that's going to be the answer. Or they're going to bring in Sam Darnold. They're going to bring in Baker Mayfield. They're going to bring in Carson Wentz. It's like, what the hell is going on?
And of course, the problem is you could be like the Orioles and be in continuous rebuild mode. You got to also be able to hit on some of those things.
At least try.
Well, I agree.
At least try. Yeah, okay. So you hit on all the wrong guys. Okay. Hey, you know what? Cleveland missed on a bunch of guys, including Baker Mayfield, and yet still you would consider their rebuild a success. They have a playoff caliber franchise because they accumulated all those picks. They got all that depth. They have a strong defense, a strong running game. They have a bunch of strong components of that team that you could project them to go to the playoffs. So was that a win? They whiffed on a bunch of picks, dude. Still.
And that's what makes you a little angry about the Bears too, right? I mean, it seemed like they were heading in the right direction with Justin Fields, and then they just done nothing at all to put stuff around him. I mean,
it's not, you don't start with Justin Fields. That's the whole point.
Okay.
Look at what the Lions are doing. Did the Lions draft a quarterback this year? No. Did they draft a quarterback last year? No. Why? Because they knew you'd be setting that quarterback up to fail. You put Justin Fields behind that offensive line, and if his number one wide receiver be a fourth-round field stretcher, Darnell Mooney, that ain't it. You're setting him up to fail, so you're going to ruin him right? You're going to ruin him, just like
Most
Carson
likely.
Wentz was ruined, right? And that they even had a good team, right? Even the Eagles had a good team, and yet they still found a way to ruin him. I mean, some of these quarterbacks, if they go down a different path, I fundamentally believe they would be completely different players if they were supported earlier in their career, if they were not forced into situations where they were out of their depth, where they were not demoralized. So, you know,
So you now
I
feel
feel very bad for Justin Fields and for Bears fans. The quarterback needs to be the final antenna on the top of a tower. That's how you need to think about it. And I keep going back to the Lions, but they're the only ones that are doing it the right way 100%.
Well, Rivera has said that that's what they're trying to do in Washington, build the team up, insert quarterback. It sounds like you are not a fan of Wentz with the offense in Washington.
Well, they bailed him out. They had this albatross in Carson Wentz, and then Washington threw Chris Ballard, who has been last couple of years completely overrated.
Fake good GM.
Right, just a fake sharp GM. You know, you think that he's saying all the right things, and then they're giving you behind the scenes, like in the war room, and it seems like, wow, these guys have a real dialed in system going on here, and that system leads them to draft Alec Pierce over Sky Moore in the second round, moves like that, where it's just like, what are we doing? Paris Campbell over DK Metcalf, and it's just one thing after another, trading a first rounder for Carson Wentz. What? And it's like, it's not like Washington doesn't know who Carson Wentz is. You've been facing him for years, twice a year. And then to let them off the hook, it was just a bummer. I was like, really? Someone did that? Oh, man, because you could have waited. And have been in the Baker Mayfield sort of bidding war, if there is one at all. But either way, just tank with your eyes open. That is the way to go. It's not like, I mean, give baseball fans, give their teams the benefit of the doubt. It's like what does Daniel Snyder think that Washington fans are idiots? Does he think that does he think that they think that this team has a chance with Wentz? I believe that if you started a proper rebuild, a proper teardown, like they did in Detroit, that Washington fans would be on board, because they're not idiots. They're actually a lot more sophisticated than most of these people want to give fans credit for.
So you don't think that what they did with Heineke last year, that Wentz isn't a 2-game upgrade, which would get you to about 9?
And
you're still in quicksand.
And what are we talking about? You want to finish last?
We finished last.
You want to get
last a lot. That's
you
the
want
problem.
CJ Stroud, baby.
Well, yeah.
Right? You want CJ Stroud with Young and Stroud, man. That would be sick. That would be absolutely sick.
Now,
or Bryce
Matt,
Young. Bryce Young would be another one.
Matt, can I sell you on
Bryce
the
Young
glass?
and Chase Young together? That would be sick.
It would be sick. Can I sell you on the glass half full view of the Washington offense?
Yes.
It's there. It's there if you're really desperate like me and looking for it. But to me, it comes down to schedule, negative game script, injury, touchdown regression, and then their offensive line. Okay. So for their schedule, they had the hardest schedule last year in all of the NFL, according to Sharp Football. This year, they have the 6th easiest. Okay. Negative game script. They were like 29th in the league in games trailing. They were always playing from behind. We know that's difficult. You talk about that a lot on your podcast. Injury. They had 111 games missed by starters last year. That was 28th in the league. Okay. And then touchdown regression. They didn't even score a touchdown on 20% of their drives. According to Rich Rebar, your friend, teams that fall into that bucket the next year end up scoring 10 more touchdowns the following season, about 70% of the time. So you could be looking at an uptick in scoring. And then on top of that, I know you care about offensive line because you talk about that a lot on your show, and obviously it's throughout your site. Last year, they finished first in the NFL in run block win rate, and they finished 4th in pass block protection rate per PFF. So their offensive line is kind of underrated. I feel like no one really talks about that. And then on top of all of that, the skill group, okay? Carson Wentz has not played with a better skill group than what Washington has right now. He barely ever has a good skill group to play with. It's either one or the other. He was supposed to have a really good offensive line last year with the Colts. They got injured. They didn't play well. But before that, I mean, who are we talking about with the Eagles? They had Dallas Goedert. They had Zach Ertz.
Well, he had 1 year with Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey, and he was an MVP candidate that year. Remember that?
That was that 1 year.
He was a serious MVP candidate that year.
2017, which
as Washington fans, we know what he could do because if you think about the scariest quarterbacks we've faced over the years, I mean, he made me nervous every time he came into town.
He looks like an all-pro to Washington fans because they're so used to Heineke or whatever else, God knows what.
But then you go to Indianapolis and they talk about how much better Matt Ryan has been managing the offense, running the system, delivering the football in practice where it needs to be. And you're like, Matt Ryan is good enough. He's not great. And so it puts Carson Wentz, a lot of this, when I hear what I'm hearing from Indianapolis, these glowing reports about Matt Ryan, I know it's a little bit like, confirmation bias of us bringing in a new guy. It's some of that for sure, but some of it leads me to believe, what's the missing piece with Carson Wentz? What is he not doing well? And my sense is that his leadership qualities are not great in terms of bringing people together, in terms of creating a team environment, in terms of getting everybody rowing in the same direction. Tom Brady's obviously the best at this. Some aren't that good at it, and still, because of their natural talent, can rise above, like Aaron Rodgers. He's a terrible leader, but it doesn't matter.
Very good at throwing the football.
Right, if you're that good. Carson Wentz, I don't know why he's maybe socially awkward. I don't understand what his deal is.
He's not one of the guys that's going to go out and have a beer with you type of guy for sure.
It's tough. I mean, if you're Andrew Luck, you can do that.
Right.
Carson Wentz, So on Caesar Sportsbook, the Washington's over-under win total for this year is 7.5.
Right.
And, so basically it seems like, they're giving you, it's a little, you have to pay a little extra to take the over, minus 115. So clearly there are some sharp bettors that are taking the over on Washington for some of the reasons you laid out. 9 wins, right? 9 and 8.
9. It sounds right. Maybe
10
in
the NFC. I mean, it's the NFC.
If everything goes well.
So 9 wins. Philadelphia's over-under is 9, and they're minus 145. So you definitely want to take the over on Philadelphia. I like Philadelphia this year. I mean, are you more worried about Philadelphia, or are you more worried about Dallas?
I personally think Philly, but I think I'm more of a believer in Hurts than most.
You should be. I agree with you. I think that's one of my favorite bets, is not necessarily the win total, but to take the Eagles to win the division.
Yeah, I'm actually not sold on Dallas at all. I actually am interested to see what the offense looks like in New York, and they've got pieces on defense. I think the division is going to be a little sneakier than I think people realize.
That's why I'm going under on the Cowboys. Yes. The Cowboys had an easy schedule last year, and remember who they played. Remember the quarterbacks, the Cowboys, like they were facing the Giants with Glennon. Right. I don't even think they faced Heineke both times. They faced Washington. I think they might have had a game in there.
Gilbert was in that one of the games that Gilbert got in. I mean,
Garrett Gilbert. I don't think they faced even Heineke both times. Yeah. I think Heineke was, he's a fun playmaker at quarterback. Like he did win some games for them. And he won them a playoff game once upon a time.
Where are you at on Scott Turner's offense? I'm curious. I've talked to people around the league. They're really high on him. Washington fans feels like they are not high on him. I'm curious where you are.
Where was he before?
Scott Turner
Yeah.
down in Carolina.
Where was he before that?
They're all from Carolina.
Where was he before that?
He's
All right,
North
so
Turner's
I mean,
son.
this is
Carrying
not.
his dad's notebook, I believe.
We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. Listen, with Rivera, you can't blame him too much because I think anyone coaching a Cam Newton is going to be challenged to run their offense. There's no such thing as your offense when Cam Newton's your quarterback. You're running the Cam Newton offense. So, which is what they found out in New England. Like, we can't even run our goddamn offense. We got to put Mac Jones out here, right? So I understand that whatever Rivera wants to do on offense, he's had Heineke and he's had Cam Newton, and so we really don't know, right? We really don't know what a system where the quarterback can deliver the ball on time and goes through his read progressions in a normal way. We really have no idea what this offense looks like. I'm just not sure Carson Wentz can either. So the hope is that you have playmakers at every level where they do, right? They have Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson has 2 straight seasons with 10+ touchdowns. This guy has been a breakaway run machine, one of the more efficient running backs, especially in his rookie year in the NFL. He's athletically comparable to Jonathan Taylor, just doesn't have the same skills between the tackles, but otherwise actually a similarly skilled player. You have McLaurin, who now is happy. He's going to report to camp. This is great news. He's one of the best professional receivers in the league. I think I saw Kelvin Harmon tweet that it was like no one's more deserving. Yeah. Whenever you see a former teammate, is he still a Washington, Kelvin Harmon?
Yeah, he's still on the practice squad.
All right. Sorry, I didn't make to see former Kelvin. Also, I interviewed Kelvin Harmon. I think he was a great college receiver at NC State. Probably not going to happen in the NFL. But no jealousy, just utmost respect for this guy. My understanding is that McLaurin is like one of the hardest working, attention to detail wide receivers. And then to have that with 4.3 wheels is amazing. Like, and toughness is amazing. So I just feel bad for him that, he has not had an above average quarterback ever in his career. DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, and it was Allen Robinson. So that's the mantle of the best wide receivers that have never had quality quarterback play. That would be it. But if you think about it, you got McLaurin on one side, you got Curtis Samuel, you've got Dotson. That is one of the best wide receiver trios in the NFL. When you think about their skills and how difficult that group is, they're all fast, where Dotson's the slowest.
Correct.
Like, Dotson's the slowest of those guys. And the versatility of Curtis Samuel, he's been healthy in camp, right? There's been no concerns with his groin or abdomen in camp, right?
No, he seems healthy.
Yeah, this is great. I mean, think about that. And De'Ami
Brown,
was a good player.
I would say, where were you at with De'Ami Brown when they drafted him?
3rd round pick, average athleticism, average dominance at the college level. But, so at 6'1", 185, there's a lot of players he comps to that weren't necessarily stars in the NFL.
Right.
Okay. His number 1 comp on our site is Denarius Moore. And I think that's fair. Denarius Moore had some weeks, like with the Raiders, with the Cowboys. Denarius Moore made some big time plays, right? So just because a guy is comped to another guy that has never really broken out all the way doesn't mean it's a failure. But when you look at his athleticism, nothing pops. When you look at his college resume, nothing really pops. He's just seems to be a very solid wide receiver. It's just that in the 3rd round, I wish they would have drafted someone with a little more upside. De'Ami Brown is the classic sort of depth receiver you would want to get in the 4th and 5th, 6th round, where I'd want a little more upside in round 3. That was, the disappointment with De'Ami Brown. And then he didn't see the field as much as he should have last year. The big concern is they had these injuries, right? Curtis Samuel could barely see the field. They had no one opposite Terry McLaurin, and yet Dammy Brown could not seize any kind of role.
Right.
That was a concern to me. So anytime a guy flames out that hard in his rookie year, the probabilities are stacked against him moving forward, unfortunately.
Nate, what you got next?
Yeah, I think Washington fans don't want to hear that, but it's a fact. I mean, you don't produce in year one. It doesn't really matter the circumstances. Yes, Taylor Heineke has a noodle arm and can't throw it deep. And, that's something that Wentz was actually pretty good at last year. He wasn't very good at a lot. He's kind of a scatter shot, but you look at playerprofiler.com, type in Carson Wentz. I mean, top 5 in deep ball accuracy, deep ball completion percentage, the stuff that matters. He's good at the deep ball, and that's the receivers they have. So it kind of meshes with their skill set.
I hope, man. I hope that my hope is that they use Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel has a very interesting track record in that one year he was used very close to the line of scrimmage in 2020. And, he put up extra catches, whatever. But the air yards were low. So he had, in 15 games played, think about this, he had 700 air yards in his final year in Carolina, but he had 14 fantasy points because he had a bunch of rushing production, et cetera, et cetera. The year before that, he led the league in unrealized air yards. He had 1,500 plus air yards. So they were just having him sprint downfield, and Cam Newton was missing him every single time.
It was Kyle Allen that was missing him.
And Kyle Allen. Oh, yeah, because Cam Newton tore up his shoulder at the beginning of the year.
Yeah,
that's right.
So we're familiar with Kyle Allen also.
Yeah, and so listen, if you're Curtis Samuel, you feel bad because, listen, all I'm doing is getting open downfield and you're missing me, or you're running me shallow and I'm getting yards after the catch. I'm making the best of it, putting up 800 receiving yards on like no target depth whatsoever, right? His receiving yards, think about this. This is very rare. His receiving yards in 2020 were greater than his air yards, which is like a riddle. How do you do that? You have to do it all with Yak.
It sounds like Rondale Moore.
Yeah, so the guy has been, I think, awesome. I think he's really underrated. Where Dammy Brown, it's like, hey, guys, I don't have good news. He's probably an average wide receiver. He's going to be a wide receiver 4 the rest of his career. He's just a depth guy, and it's fine. He's probably better than a bunch of other number 4, number 5 wide receivers around the league. Cool, right? That's what he is. Curtis Samuel actually has some interesting upside, and I really hope that they play him more on the outside and have a quarterback better than Kyle Allen that can deliver him the football deep. And I think you challenge safeties having both McLaurin and Samuel deep and then running Dotson underneath. I've heard that's the configuration they have. So that alone tells me, you asked me about the offensive coordinator, that alone tells me a lot. So if that is going to be how they configure this offense, then they're on the right track. If they try to make Curtis Samuel into this gadget guy, into like a Cordell Patterson or something, I think that's going to be a tremendous waste of resources.
We actually had Evan Silva on the show this time last year before Samuels got hurt, and it was Fitzpatrick, and everybody was excited about the offense. And he told us then, it's interesting that you say that, expect they play him on the boundary and use him that way and not in the gadget form. So
I hope so.
There you go.
He was good there. He was good there.
And he played somewhere at Ohio State. I don't think people realize that. At Ohio State, he played on boundary a bunch.
Yeah, like 4.30 wheels. He's faster than McLaurin.
Yes, he is.
Like, I mean, there's very few teams. Like, here's what I would do. I would look at what we have that is good and better and superior to most teams. Most teams don't have 2-4-3 wide receivers that can play, that can actually squeeze the football. You have that. Well, so that would be my starting point. What makes us special? Well, very few teams have an Antonio Gibson level talent at running back, and almost nobody has 2-4-3 wide receivers of the quality of McLaurin and Samuel. Let's leverage that. Let's build the offense around that. Right. And if that means funneling a bunch of targets underneath to Dotson for first downs, great.
Right.
Like whatever that, I'm just saying, I want to see, if you see the offensive coordinator building the offense based on the players they have to capitalize on their strengths and what makes them unique, as opposed to, I have a system and my system had worked. I worked under Shanahan, and we need to find the right players for our system. That is the wrong approach. That approach actually never works.
That's right. That's right. It's interesting. You brought up Allen Robinson. I go through stretches of time not even realizing that he's on the Rams. What does that do to the rest of the guys fantasy wise on that roster?
It's great. I mean, you can't expect Cooper Kupp to be what he was last year because Allen Robinson is there now, and Allen Robinson I think is a slight upgrade over Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham is not the red zone weapon that Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson's a monster in the red zone. So I think there's going to be a downtick in the Cooper Kupp red zone targets. And that's going to affect fantasy. Fantasy is all about touchdowns and targets. So that's the issue. And defenses aren't going to let them just, Cooper Kupp dictate the terms, over and over and over and over and over again. I just can't see that happening. I can't see them letting him. I don't understand how they let him get free releases so often. I just don't get it. I think that, remember, during a season, these teams only have like one day to prepare in the film room. And then they're in practice, and then they're like in the tub trying to get their bodies ready for the next game. They're trying to install their own new plays, right? There's only so much. This is such an overrated thing. Like, people think that week to week there's all this scheming, because that's what the broadcasters love to talk about. That they love narrative, to talk about all the scheming. How do you really think that there's like a ton of scheming week to week? No, there's not. They can barely get the practice squad guys out there for a practice, and they only have one practice that's even a real practice, Wednesdays. That's it, right? So it's like maybe some stuff in the film room, maybe some new plays, right? Or maybe some new techniques, but that's why even late in the season, a Cooper Kupp is going to continue to abuse defenses. Now that you have the full off season, and all these NFC West teams can go back to the drawing board throughout camp, right? And they can really dig into the film. They can go, and that's the beauty of training camp. That's why you have training camp, is so that we can create a bunch of different packages to try to attack teams that have a Cooper Kupp, that have an Adam Thielen. I think it's going to be a different world. That's why a lot of wide receivers oscillate year to year. It's very rare that a wide receiver is consistent year to year. You'll notice that they're very spiky with their output every year. Even a Mike Evans, he's spiky in the way he gets his output. Like, this year with yards, this year with touchdowns, right? The wide receiver is a very volatile position because year to year depends on the cornerback matchups, the teams you're playing, what defensive schemes they use. And then the next year, if you were that Cooper Kupp from the previous year, you're going to have a whole bunch of teams that are going to treat you completely differently. So for a bunch of reasons, I think that all points to Allen Robinson, because no one has seen Allen Robinson in a Rams uniform. There is no tape on Allen Robinson. So I think Allen Robinson is going to be able to catch teams by surprise, how good he is, and how different this offense is with a real alpha on the outside. That's the guy. That's the guy I want in fantasy football, is Allen Robinson. The crazy thing is, we have all these early drafts that happen in February, March, April. Usually they're called best ball leagues. And these best ball leagues, where you don't set your lineup, you just draft guys early and you see what happens. Allen Robinson was like an 8th round pick. And then he was a 7th round pick. And then he was a 6th round pick. Like, if you look at his ADP chart, we have this ADP chart on Player Profiler, which shows, and you can see this steady march up, until now. He's a 4th round pick in fantasy, which is almost like as high as he ever was in his career. And the quarterbacks he's had in his career are Blake Bortles, Nick Foles, Justin Fields, Andy Dalton. Think about it.
Sounds almost
Terry McLaurin can relate.
I was just thinking the same thing. Matt, do you have a particular way you like to draft? We're always hearing about these different styles. You've got hero running back and zero running back and stacks. And
we invented hero running back. I coined that term because I like to get one running back in the first 2 or 3 rounds and, build around that guy, because the running back 2 spot, that second running back spot in fantasy football, is very malleable. You want to make sure that you give yourself the opportunity to hit a home run at the second running back position, whether it be Elijah Mitchell last year, whether it be Antonio Gibson the year before. There's always going to be a breakout running back that you can slide into that number 2 spot. So you always want to draft knowing that you're going to be able to figure out that number 2 running back spot eventually and not worry too much about it. So this year, that guy could be, the number 1 candidate for that guy this year is going to be Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard's the best non-starter. He's being lined up all over the formation. He was more efficient than Zeke in every metric last year. He didn't hurt his PCL and play through it like Zeke did. He doesn't have all this mileage like Zeke does. I think he's just a better talent at this point in his career than Zeke across the board. So I just think he's going to keep earning more opportunity. Every running back, or most running backs, miss some games. In those games, Tony Pollard's going to be like maybe the best running back in fantasy. Like he's going to be in play every week to be that Zeke doesn't play, to be literally the number 1 running back in fantasy, given that they don't, you know who they have behind him? Can you name the running backs? Rico Dowdle? Like something McCrary? Like nobody knows. It's wild. They don't have anybody. They didn't even draft anybody this in the last draft. They haven't drafted a running back in years. And they haven't signed anybody in years. Since Tony Pollard.
They love Zeke.
Right? It's just like, listen, it sets up perfectly for Pollard this year. Some other guys that I think are interesting. Tyrion Davis-Price, no one talks about, but he has explosive breakaway run ability. And, Elijah Mitchell was a great story, but he's a 6th round pick and he's undersized. Josh Jacobs is there, but Kenyon Drake has yet to be cleared. And Zamir White, you could argue, is a more explosive between the tackles runner than Josh Jacobs. And it's not like Josh Jacobs is this incredible pass catcher. So Zamir White is an interesting fringe guy that I think could secure the number 2 job in Las Vegas. This guy was an explosive. I mean, anyone that watches college football knows Zamir White's the truth right at Georgia. James Cook is another one in Buffalo. He's going to be the best running back on Buffalo. Maybe he's not the biggest, but he's certainly going to be the best. And anytime you can have exposure, as they say, to the Buffalo Bills offense, and with a 2nd round level talent in a guy like a James Cook, Breece Hall. So most of the running backs I would be targeting in my number 2 spot would come later in the draft. I mean, Travis Etienne, but he's been moving up. I think Etienne is prime for an incredible breakout year. You look at his college resume, 2 seasons with 1,600 plus rushing yards. He has 100 catches on his resume, 75 touchdowns on his resume, and he's athletically comparable to players we love, like DeAndre Swift. Size, speed, production profile, 1st round capital. So foot injury looks fine. I've seen videos. This is why we have news in the offseason. You can watch the videos. You can see him running around. You can judge for yourself. He's like dodging trash cans. Great. Looks good, right? Michael Thomas. He's trying to run around and show people. And you're like, wait, you're only running in a straight line and your leg looks like a toothpick. You're not
been
doing
on IR
for
like 2 years now. Like, when is he going to be healthy again?
Yeah, no, we like to say, put the film off to the side and let that be a tiebreaker. You should focus on the metrics. Yes, true. But with guys like Michael Thomas, you need to start using your intuition a little bit. You need to start thinking about what's the probability really that he comes back at all? And if he does, what kind of player is he going to be? And why wasn't he cleared for minicamp if it's been 2 years already? And what the hell are these cryptic videos he's sending that are not even making me feel better, making me feel worse about where he's at with his recovery? and then you got to take it to the next level from that. So in fantasy, what I'm trying to do is, Chris Olave might be my 4th or 5th wide receiver.
Right.
Get a bunch of quality wide receivers, close it out with Chris Olave, and then just back up the truck at the end of your draft with running backs and a lot of rookie running backs that have juice and can be this year's Antonio Gibson from 2020. That's what we're chasing. Athleticism at running back. And remember, back in 2020, it was thought, oh, well, who was it? Adrian Peterson or someone was going to be the guy, and it's like, no, the guy with juice is going to actually overcome and give you 10 touchdowns. And that's exactly what happened with Antonio Gibson. So I say get one running back you believe in early, like a DeAndre Swift, surround him with wide receivers, and then pound running back late. Young running backs.
You're muted. You're still muted, Nate.
Not anymore. I was going to say, I think if you can target those handcuffs that are cheap but on good offenses that are overlooked, you can get a lot of value. Like, I don't like to touch my second running back if I'm going with a hero build until like round 9 or round 10. I like guys like Kenneth Gainwell, or even really late. This is a weird one.
Gainwell's a great one.
Because he's on a good offense. If something happens to Sanders, he's right there. I mean,
if something happens to Sanders,
you're right.
If something happens to Sanders,
when something happens,
if oh man, Gainwell, woo.
And he's a good pass catcher. He was the better pass catcher at Memphis. He's the one who kicked Antonio Gibson out to receiver because
if you like James Cook, right? If you're drafting James Cook, then you should also like it. You should like Kenneth Gainwell. So we can look that up right now. It's called ADP arbitrage. There's not a big difference between, the offense in Philadelphia and the Bills offense, actually, where James Cook in these best ball leagues, he's going at slot 108.
Yep.
And then if we go to Gainwell,
156,
he's going at 156. You get 50 picks of arbitrage where it's essentially similar player, similar role, similar system, similar quarterback skill set. Right? Oh, he's no Josh Allen. Well, let's see. Through 2 seasons, Hurts has been a hell of a lot better than Josh Allen was through 2 seasons. Okay? These guys have similar size, similar athletic profiles. Okay? It's just that Hurts succeeded at the highest level in college. Josh Allen never did. So this is part of the reason why, if I'm Washington, I'm actually scared of Philadelphia.
No, I'm with you.
Me too. I've always surprised all the hate on Hurts. I mean, I'm not trying to, pump up the Eagles. It's not what we do here, but
no. And they got that guy Davis, who's like 200 or 350 pounds and can like dunk a basketball. If he could just, stay away from the donuts and stay on the elliptical machine, Jordan Davis is going to be a nightmare.
This is also a part-time Georgia Bulldog show, so I was very disappointed when a lot of those guys, they got Roquan Smith for a steal. So yeah, I mean,
Howie Roseman had quite the draft.
He did.
He had quite the draft.
And
sorry to say it.
And we don't even talk about AJ Brown being on the team. Yeah, that kind of gets forgotten.
He had a very good. This is a very good team. This is a very good team. And so Dallas better watch out. The Dallas people that think that they're just gonna,
I agree,
slide right into the playoffs per norm, win the division. Watch out.
Their
defense and these games against Washington too. Washington always plays Dallas tough, and all those things you talked about. Improved offensive line, right? The defense is better than people know. The
Dallas defense isn't going to force a million turnovers like they did last year.
Exactly. They led the league in turnovers. That's never replicatable, ever.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, come on, man. How is Chase Young looking? Is he going to be back 100%?
I bet not. I bet he starts the year off on the pup. That'd just be my guess.
I hope he does. He better. They better not try to force him back. That guy's the franchise, man. You got to be careful with him.
No, totally. Nate, you want to finish with the vet versus the rookie here?
Yeah, let's do this rapid fire, Matt, like your podcast. Okay, we're just going to hit on a few rookie versus the vet at ADP. Who do you have in underdog? All right, so let's go down the list. We got Drake London at 71 versus Russell Gage at 76.
Oh man, we had this conversation on my show. God damn you. This is a really tough one. This is a real tough one. I would say, based on the rest of your receivers, right? If you already have a couple young receivers, maybe go Gage, because Gage, is going to be super productive, at least in the first 6 weeks of the season. I mean, newsflash, Chris Godwin had a late season ACL and MCL tear. He's not going to be playing for a while. And the news is trickling out. And every time everyone's surprised, like, oh, really? Yeah. Gage is up another full round in underdog, right? It's like, where you been? That said, I love Drake London, man. Like, Drake London he's having that Jamar Chase camp where no one's talking about him. He's not in the news in the best possible way. It's not like he can't breathe like Traylon Burks, right? I would just as soon him keep under the radar, healthy, not making waves, and be like a true number one, a monster. So I'm an upside connoisseur. I'm gonna go Drake London, but I also know that Russell Gage is an incredible value and has been. It's just sad that those days are probably over just because of the Gronk retirement. The fact that would be the thing that pops his ADP is maddening to me. It's like, it was obvious all along, people. Brady recruited him.
It's been a long time, it feels like, since there's been like a consensus. I hear more about Gage than I can remember hearing about any guy in the last couple of years. All I hear about in the fantasy football world is Gage.
He seems like a Brady.
Are you serious?
Oh, yeah. You don't think so? You hear people
no, like,
all the time to buy Gage stuff.
I'm on the other side of the megaphone, right? I've been the one that's been like, Russell Gage, guys. Come on, you got to get Russell Gage. He's way underrated. So I didn't know that this was like an echo chamber. I thought we were just like, tilting at windmills and like, screaming into the void on Russell Gage. But now that I see his ADP's creeping up, I this is what happens, man. A little crack in the dam, and then the entire all fantasy analysts rush to like fill the void. Right? Oh, there's a little crack. Oh, Gronkowski's retiring. Now all of a sudden, no one can stop talking about Russell Gage.
All right, I'm with you. Okay, let's. How about Chris Olave at pick 99 versus Allen Lazard at pick 88?
Oh, dude, Chris Olave.
Yeah.
Dude, Olave is the upside play here. I love Lazard as well. Lazard is like Gage in that they're both super undervalued. One guy's the number one receiver. And the idea that Christian Watson's going to outproduce Allen Lazard is just fiction.
Ridiculous.
Silly.
That's right.
Like, Lazard is a true alpha in that he's not like overpowering. He's not like a super alpha or anything like that. He's not Mike Evans, but he is kind of have a Mike Evans game. And I think that Aaron Rodgers, if there's going to be a guy that's going to throw that back shoulder, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. So I think Aaron Rodgers and Lazard are going to have a real nice relationship and good chemistry. That said, right? Chris Olave was the most impressive wide receiver through 7 games in 2020. Then he and Garrett Wilson had the exact same stat lines, but he is, much better regarded in terms of being a better route runner, in terms just the art of playing wide receiver. Of all the wide receivers in this draft, he is that guy. If there's going to be a Marvin Harrison, if there's going to be like a Jeremy Maclin type, it's going to be Chris Olave. And we talked about Michael Thomas. Watch him not even freaking play this year.
Yeah. Were you surprised Washington passed on him?
I was surprised Washington passed on Traylon Burks. Washington passed on Traylon Burks to take Dotson. I thought that was a mistake because Dotson is a senior, and Dotson doesn't have the reason. Like, Olave was a senior because he wanted to graduate with a bunch of his friends, and he only had that 7-game season in the COVID year. So that I understood a little bit better. Dotson was always going to be, a 4-year player. He was very dominant, and he certainly has good comps, right? He has comps to like Tyler Lockett and some undersized wide receivers that have been quality NFL players. I think he's probably going to be more like, of the Seattle receivers, I think he's probably going to be more like Doug Baldwin at the NFL level in a good way. right? I think he has volume slot receiver potential. So I think he's cool. I think he's cool. I just wish he had produced more earlier at Penn State. But like Olave, he didn't have a full season. And his 2020 was pretty impressive. He would have had in a full season, he would have had over 1,000 yards as a junior as well. Even going back to like Chris Godwin was what, 30 pounds heavier at Penn State, produced at a much higher level as a sophomore, and then came out early. So if you want to compare, like, Penn State players from the past, he's not going to be Chris Godwin. Like, there's just a lot of things on that prospect profile, check marks he doesn't have. But that's not to say he can't be some version of Tyler Lockett meets Doug Baldwin. It's just, for me, you can get guys like that in the second round. That's why I would have been.
KJ Hamler. I mean, they're teammates. They're kind of similar players. And healthy KJ Hamler.
I mean, that's the reason why maybe he didn't produce as much, because they had Hamler. But I mean, you can't use Hamler as the reason why. Like, Hamler, really, that's the reason why he didn't produce more.
Freiermuth was there too. But I mean,
I would rather have the Traylon Burks archetype, because those guys are very hard to find. It's like the same reason why everyone was up in arms when the Eagles and so many of these teams passed on DK Metcalf, right? So it wasn't just the Eagles. It was also the Cardinals. The Cardinals took Andy Isabella, right? Who had a great Senior Bowl, speedy slot receiver, right? And it's like, yeah, but dude, you had this true alpha on the board. You got to get that guy. Guys like Andy Isabella are a lot easier to find later in the draft. You can get a Darnell Mooney later.
Yeah. What about Hakeem Butler? They got him right after that. Here's your answer.
Hakeem Butler. Wow. Yeah. I said he's gonna have a great career at tight end. And then sure enough. I also said that Chase Claypool will be a great NFL tight end. And that story is not over yet. That story's not over, because Calvin Austin has great speed, right? See, that's a better value to me. Okay. I know that Washington didn't need the speed. But if you think about the configuration of the offense, if you could have played Burks, right, with McLaurin and Samuel, that's even more dangerous, where you have all small receivers. So that was the other thing. I was like, well, I do like this configuration. If they put Samuel out wide, it's a good configuration. It's just very small, right? You're very small. Whereas
they wanted London, but he was gone.
I mean,
that's
called tilting.
That's right.
That's called tilting. That's like in fantasy football when the guy you're about to draft is off the board and you panic.
That's right.
So, and this is what Washington does. Washington has this reputation of panicking and getting locked in to a particular guy and trading up and getting their guy, or panicking. Whereas what they should have been doing is making all these phone calls, have all these contingency plans, and wheeling and dealing and trading down. And they could have got Dotson if they had traded down, maybe, or another player like a George Pickens would be a great fit on this team. Great fit. Or like a guy that's similar to Dotson, the most similar guy to Dotson is actually Sky Moore. Sky Moore went exactly around later, and there's almost no difference between these two guys in terms of prospect profile. So that's my criticism of Washington, is that they took basically a second round receiver in the first round. And if you do that enough times, that's how you get beat by teams with more depth.
Well, they did end up adding Brian Robinson as well as part of that trade down. So, I mean, essentially you got a running back, I mean, for whatever that's worth there, and the receiver.
Come on.
No?
Come on, Brian Robinson. Come on. Come on. So Brian Robinson, another great example, where look at the running backs that went after Brian Robinson in the fourth round. Isaiah Spiller. Okay. Yep. You had Zamir White. You had Pierre Strong.
Sure.
Okay. So this has been, if you want to know why Washington is in this 8 and 9 purgatory, the beyond like not having like a more of an overarching plan, like there's two things. There's two reasons. If they installed an overarching plan where they said, okay, we're going to get Chase Young, that was awesome. And then we're going to go left tackle, and then we're going to like build and build and build and build. And we're going to, run it back with Taylor Heineke or whatever. We're not going to pay a dime for whatever quarterback is under center. We're not going to overpay at all for a Wentz or whatever. And they started building from the ground up, building inside out, and then bringing in that quarterback at the very end. But also along the way, that's one part of it. The second part of it is managing each pick and getting the most out of it, either trading all the way out of the round or banking picks in the future, finding a way to turn that first rounder into a first rounder next year. Right. So those are some things that they could be doing. And that's all about contingency planning. That's all about working the phones. And it turns out, I hate to say it, but there is a guy in the division, Howie Roseman, that we know is very good at that. Sometimes he overthinks it, right? Sometimes he outthinks himself. He's going J.J. Arcega-Whiteside over DK Metcalf. He's going Rager over Jefferson. Like, he's not perfect. Like, he's overthinking it. But, like, it's still better to max out your draft capital every way, and then maybe you're overthinking it on an individual player basis. Maybe you're whiffing and taking player X when you should have taken player Y. I think that's more defensible than just straight up taking guys around before guys that are similar are going, and not banking picks into the future, not maxing out your, having great salary cap planning and maxing out your compensatory picks. So those teams that are maxing out their compensatory picks, those teams that are doing the most trading down, that are creating, and also the beauty is, if you do have like an owner or a general manager who's impatient or something at some point, if you did have all that firepower, those extra picks, you could move up, or you could trade for an AJ Brown, or you can make a move up to get a guy if you've been storing these picks, where even when they're trading down, what are they netting? A running back in the third round. Aw, you know what I mean? It's like, these are the little wins. Like, I get it. Like, hey, we traded down finally. What do we get out of it? Third round running back.
Well, it's a step forward, a step back.
Forward. It's progress.
Well, they're losing a second round pick next year if Wentz plays more than 70% of the games, but they're supposed to get a third round pick for Brandon Sheriff walking. So it's like you get one back, but you lose it again. You never net accrue and get in that plus EV like you want to get to.
Why didn't they extend Sheriff earlier and not let him walk at all?
They tried to give him the biggest contract in NFL history for a guard 2 years ago, but he said no. And I think part of the reason is he doesn't want to play here. And then
that's fine. They put their best foot forward with him, and that's all you can do.
I mean,
that's all you can do.
Yeah, their offensive line is going to be good no matter what. Last year, they missed a ton of starters. They were still like a top 5 offensive line. I think they just have a good scheme for pass protecting.
That is the other thing, though. If you can identify who your talented players are and get them locked up as soon as they're eligible for extensions, right? I mean,
yes,
that is huge. Being able to self-scout and identify, that would have probably put them in. They would have saved money on McLaurin had they done that
sooner. Yeah, like last year. Yeah,
if they had extended McLaurin sooner, if they had that contract ready the day he was eligible for an extension, because they know he's awesome. By the time he was eligible 2 years in, we all knew McLaurin was like that guy.
What I'm sure they didn't see was the wide receiver market just exploding this offseason.
Well, I mean, that's why you got to extend your guys that are good. Like, if I get a McLaurin, if he walks through the door and he's on board and he's not like Sheriff and he's fine with the organization, he's an organization guy too, right?
Yeah.
That's a big deal. He's a culture guy. That's such a big deal to wait until the final hour to get him extended. These are some of the micro mistakes that end up where you're leaking salary cap space, where you don't have that guard that you maybe could have or should have as depth. These are all the things that can swing a playoff berth or not, or winning a game in the playoffs. Some of these little micro moves. So, with a team like Washington, they're a long way away. They need to get the strategy. They need to start creating a culture of maxing out the draft and not making frivolous picks, of maxing out their players' contracts as early as possible and maximizing the value on their young players as soon as they break out and they know what they have. So there's a lot, dude. There's one team out of 32 wins the Lombardi Trophy every year. And the amount of execution and things that have to break your way, in addition to having the right culture and just the right approach to like managing your roster, is incredible. It's a huge undertaking. So, it's not surprising to me that 80% of teams are dead on week one. It's like no shot. And then it's crazy when teams it's crazy when like the Jaguars, they clearly don't have the plan, the culture, the front office sort of competence to do a proper rebuild. So they're dead forever. But like some teams that you thought could never figure it out, something happens, like in Cincinnati, where it's like as soon as Paul Brown, or whatever his name is, not Paul Brown, something Brown. As soon as he started ceding control of the organization, as soon as he got old and someone else was starting to help him make decisions, help grandpa pick the groceries, right? All of a sudden it's like, oh, T. Higgins, that was a good pick. They signed the offensive lineman from Minnesota. That was smart. Oh, they just signed away a guard from Brady and from New England, at value.
Doesn't hurt to have Joe Burrow either.
Yeah, they got Joe Burrow, whatever. I'm just saying, like, it's not just Burrow, though. What they've been doing has been super smart all along the way. Hey, we're going to support Joe Burrow with a wide receiver. And he's, we're not going to get faked out by Kyle Pitts, right? Or Jalen Waddle, right? The move was Jamar Chase, either Jamar Chase or Penei Sewell, and they did that. So you never know. You never know when a team can take its head out of its ass, and Cincinnati did. So they were dead for a long time.
See, but Dan Snyder's so young. He's gonna be stuck here forever. That's
never gonna the problem for us. Yep. Unless he just lets Ron and company do it, and I don't know that Ron and company could do it either. They haven't necessarily proven it. So
no. The next Super Bowl winning quarterback for Washington is probably in high school. The next the Super Bowl winning coach for Washington is some
in college.
He's like working with whatever. He's working with quarterbacks or something somewhere. Yeah, in college, something. Yeah, it's a ways away, but like you said, that I'm excited just for the wide receiver core.
Yeah, they've got weapons, if nothing else.
For once, yeah.
Matt, if we didn't learn anything today, then I don't know when we'll do it. Thank you so much for coming on today. What do you got coming up next on the podcast? And of course, we're going to put a link to the website here on the broadcast.
Yep. Next week, Evan Silva and I take down Seattle, and we explain everything that's wrong with Seattle. You can't rebuild around a 70-year-old coach that looks like a skeleton with a rubber mask on. They should have extended DK Metcalf already. They're in the same problem, right? So they're making all the wrong moves. They're trading up. They're taking a running back in the second round. They're just, it's everything. It's everything. It's a team without a plan. And they're delusional, and their fan base is delusional, and it feeds into it, right? It feeds into it. So they're going to go ahead and sign Baker Mayfield, and it's going to be gross. It's going to be gross. And I think we're going to include a link in the show notes. We also have our draft kit. So anyone that wants to dominate their fantasy draft, we lay out everything in our cheat sheet. just perfectly for you, for you to dominate a best ball team, best ball league, and any seasonal league that you do with your friends, high stakes. So the draft kit has these team breakdowns that talk about the team situation, what it means for Wentz coming to Washington, what it means for like Dallas having a harder schedule, and what that means and what the impact is for fantasy football. So yeah, our draft kit is, I think, the best in the business. Put links in the show description for that. And that's what you need for fantasy football this year.
Real quick before we get out of here, what's your favorite way to play?
Dynasty leagues are my favorite because I'm so in the NFL draft mode I do this all year round. So I like investing in these players when they're young, getting Chris Olave, right? Getting a Tyrion Davis-Price, and then
Brian
some of these
Robinson.
maybe Brian Robinson. But a couple of years ago, Antonio Gibson, I went to the Senior Bowl. I saw Antonio Gibson. I loved his profile. He was a total freak, with the pass catching skills, with his size and athleticism. Being able to hit on a guy like Antonio Gibson, in the second round of your rookie draft, that's a great feeling. In fact, I had Scott Fish on the show, and he hit on Antonio Gibson 2 years ago, and that was one of the reasons why he was ready to contend this year. So that I love that, and I love like understanding these guys, their stories, where they come from. Rashad White, take a guy like Rashad White, something happens to Fournette, you'd be a total monster, and you drafted him because you went to Player Profiler, you saw how good he was in the passing game and how athletic he is, and then you read about his story and how he left home and went by himself with no support to California and got a job. I don't even know what he was doing. He got a job in like a factory or something so he could pay for himself to go to community college and be one of like 20 running backs and like somehow stand out and then somehow transfer. And then it's a cool story. That guy's probably going to be a success in the league. Guys like that are somehow successes in the league as guys that he flashed. He had his best year in his sophomore year and then he got worse. And then he sort of rested on his athleticism for the rest of his career. Like Sammy Watkins, right? It's just interesting. Like a guy like Sammy Watkins, there's no way you could know. There's no way you could know that he wasn't wired in a way like Terry McLaurin's wired.
Right.
When they were coming out of college, everyone, 100 out of 100 people would have said Sammy Watkins. But my guess is if you knew Terry and you knew Sammy personally and you would really understand the mentals on those guys, you might think twice. And that's part of why I love it, because all the stats and all the metrics alone don't tell the full story. So you got to keep digging.
Matt, thank you so much for coming on to me. I had a blast today.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.